I would say it was long overdue. The problem we were facing was that a lot of customers would come and find the stagnant water there, especially our guests. When they come and then they get their vehicles, they get dirty, they will sleep in our place. Then as they go back, the vehicle becomes dirty again. And most of the times there are people who would come and do not even want to get into the water.
Area residents have for years had to deal with clogged drainages and unsightly puddles during the wet season. That was an eyesore for visiting tourists. With the upgrading of the roads to all-weather, access and movement within Little Italy is assured.
In my design, going to take care of the drainage. We are going to put two, cross culverts. One is 900 millimeters, and the one is 600 millimeters. And also we are going to put a vertical drain, 4 of vertical drain, also that will take care of the drainage.
The other projects, we are going to have a recycling of waste in Kasorina, recycling of solid waste. And then there's the drainage within the town. The drainage within the town is very narrow. It was made for those volumes of water, little volumes of water. So we are going to expand the drainage all the way from the roundabout up to the end, Lawfords.
Chairman of the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry Kilifi County, Majid Swaleh, maintains that the facelift was timely and worthwhile for the prosperity, despite criticism for lack of public participation. Malindi is referred to as Little Italy due to its historical ties with Italy, as well as its popularity with Italians back at home. Regina Manyara reporting for Channel 1 Business.
And away from business, let's look at some sporting action now, where Kenya eyes 2 slots in 2021 Olympic team. That is the main caption when it comes to sports. This morning, Kenya Amateur Weightlifting Association logs to send at least 2 weightlifters to next year's Tokyo Olympic Games. This is Pius Ochieng, the KAWA president, said they will host Africa Youth and Junior Championship in Nairobi, which will act as Dakar 2021 Youth Olympics qualifiers. He further on says that we presented one player, James Omondi, who's 94 kgs, to the 2016 Rio Olympic Games, and this time, which is now the 2021 Tokyo Olympics, they are now targeting on lining up at least 2 weightlifters in that specific championship. Now coming to Tanzania on matters of sport, just at the bottom end of the paper, Tanzanian club fires Belgian coach over racist remarks, and this is just a popular Tanzanian football club yesterday fired its Belgian coach for making racist comments after he was recorded referring to unruly fans as monkeys or dogs. This is how this Tanzanian coach was calling the unruly fans, and this is Luke Emayel, who is the coach for the Young African Sports Club, made the comments after a 1-1 draw last week against Mtibwa Sugar, and this angered fans of his team. Now, we have been saddened by unfair and racist remarks made by the coach, and we decided to fire him effective July 27th this year, the team said in a statement signed by its acting sec-gen, who is Simon Patrick. So they decided to fire this Tanzanian coach because of racism, just calling the footballers there monkeys and dogs, and this is just after a 1-1 draw of the 2 teams.
Well, now still keeping up with the local rather sports is that Kenyan champion Baldev Singh Chaga is looking forward for the WRC Safari Rally with great expectations. Now, so the Safari Rally was scheduled for July 16th and 17th, but was pushed to 2021 due to the coronavirus pandemic. That was definitely the wrong story there and had totally nothing to do with the Safari Rally. And as we've said, there's the Kenyan champion Baldev Singh Chaga is indeed looking forward for the WRC Safari Rally with great expectation. Now remember, the Safari Rally was to take place on the 16th and 17th of July, but had to be pushed to 2021 due to the coronavirus pandemic. How about we get that report from our reporter Barclay Odendo?
Baldev Singh Chaga is looking forward to the WRC Safari Rally set to be held in 2021. The reigning national champion says home drivers have an opportunity to brush shoulders with the big boys of Global Series when the fabled Safari Rally revisits the glamour and intensity of FIA World Rally Championship. Chaga, though, admits defending the coveted Safari title against WRC's top drivers will be a tall order given the intricate nature of their high-flying machines. The KNRC log leader after KCB Guru Nanak and Nyahururu Rally reckons that fast stage times anticipated from WRC teams will nevertheless help local drivers up their game and approach the Safari Rally with the much-needed aggression. Chaga has only driven in one WRC Safari in 1998 when he finished 15th overall with Tinu Khan in a Subaru Legacy. The world's toughest rally is among the 9 events confirmed for inclusion in the 2021 WRC season, according to resolutions recently passed by the global governing body FIA's World Motorsport Council. Safari returned to the Global Series after an 18-year absence, but was postponed from 2020 to 2021 due to the coronavirus pandemic. WRC Safari Rally Chief Executive Officer Phineas Kimathi says his secretariat is still working on initial timelines that assume the rally was still running on its initial dates of July 16th to 19th. Kimathi last weekend led a high-powered WRC Safari Rally management team on an update visit of the Safari Park in Naivasha.
Reported by Barclay Odendo puts a cap on the headlines in as far as the latest news making headlines in the last 24 hours. Remember, we'll be keeping tabs as to which direction the Senate is going to take in the proposed revenue sharing allocation. Remember, option 1 is that the CRA proposes and puts emphasis on population versus the amended version, in which counties get what they were allocated in the fiscal year 2018-2019. There's been, fence-sitters, proponents and critics of this proposed formula. And one who is considered a fence-sitter in this regard is none other than Deputy President William Ruto, who apparently says that there needs to be a win-win situation for this, but however is very, smart about it and does not take any sides in whether to his supporting the revenue sharing formula or not. Further on, the pressing, or rather the direction that this particular voting today is going to take has been pegged to have a bit of influence as to which direction the BBI report bill is going to take. Further on is that if this revenue allocation allocation bill passes as proposed, it means that 28 counties drawn mostly from Central, Western and Rift Valley are to gain, while 19 others from the coastal region, Eastern and Northern Kenya are to lose out. So we'll be keeping tabs on that in regard to what is happening in the Senate this morning. Now, we take a short break, but in return, we're going to be having a brief conversation with one of the stakeholders within the hospitality industry, and that is none other than the CEO of the Kenya Association of Hotel Keepers and Caterers, to just get his reaction to the president's speech yesterday that outlawed, sale of alcohol in bars and eateries, as well as reviewed, the closure time for the restaurants to 7 p.m. and 8 p.m. How then does this affect the hospitality industry? Coming at a time when bar owners are saying that they are appealing to the government to review that particular directive, saying that it is going to hurt the industry. That is coming up in not too long. We take a short break. We'll focus on such issues, and we welcome your reactions to President Uhuru Kenyatta's speech yesterday. Our Twitter handle is at KBC Channel 1 News. Mine is at Ray Manyara, and my colleagues is at Doreen Arange. What is your take in regard to President Kenyatta's address yesterday?
When we moved from analog to digital, we took the opportunity to share our talanta. And the rise of local radio represented our voices mtaani. And now, in these difficult times, free educational shows are helping our children learn from home. And new ICT and educational platforms are going to make sure that no one is left behind.
Mawasiliano kwetu, nguvu kwako. The Communications Authority of Kenya, opening your world.
This Tuesday on KBC Channel 1.
If there was anything more I could do for Julia and this gym.
Everyone has their life to lead.
Didn't show up for training.
Where is he?
Hustling somewhere, I suppose. You see what is happening? I warned you.
I can't afford to have him on my books right now.
According to the document, it appears that she is the owner.
What? So you mean my father never paid her?
No, we're not sure.
The secret is all in the coordination. You want me to help?
Embakasi utawala tuko locked ungem Utanyahururu Kasuku Massive
Jeshi ya Nyeri Coast Maua na Kura kwa locked mbaya
Kigumo Ward na ambao wote wako ndani ya KBC Channel 1
Akulaliki Wednesday bila the ref
Mbotela auta idara Kitengela
Kiambu County 33 Pipeline Meru anawakilisha
Rongai Maboksa pale go down Karatina auta Mlolongo wana enjoy show Lare Sub County auta Githurai 45 Lanet Barracks tuko ndani yake Okongo auta Carnation Maragwa Seti
Nairobi
Thika wako locked mbaya sana
Watu wangu wa Nakuru Ngwaro
auta Gilgil live kutoka Mazeras Bahati Massive
Embo Thika Massive
Siaya Shikambi Kakamega Bungoma County
Kusia Boda
Kisumu City
Malindi yote iko ndani ya the ref.
When I'm in Kenya, I tune in to the rave. Get your mind brave, focus, conscious.
Kenya,
East Africa.
Right.
Keep it locked.
Calling out to Africa.
Good morning once again. If you're tuning in, this is KBC Channel 1 and this is Good Morning Kenya on the 28th of July 2020. Now, yesterday, President Uhuru Kenyatta, in his state of address in regard to just their directives that the government is willing to take and has put in place to ensure the spread, to stem the spread of COVID-19, some of the raft of the issues that were brought about is that curfew, the national-wide curfew from 9 p.m. to 4 a.m. has been extended for another 30 days. Still, bars, in as far as bars shall remain closed until further notice, while restaurants and eateries will no longer sell alcohol and are also set to close not at 8 p.m. this time, but at 7 p.m. This took in effect as of midnight yesterday. We're joined by the CEO of the Kenya Association of Hotel Keepers and Caterers, Mike Masharia. Good morning, Mike. How are you?
I'm fine, Regina. Good morning.
Yes, great to have you on board. Would want to just pick your brain in regard to that particular directive by President Uhuru Kenyatta. As an industry player, what do you think, how then will this impact, the hospitality industry, especially with a review of the hours of operation to 7 p.m. from 8 p.m. and also the ban on sale of alcohol in eateries and restaurants?
Thank you, Regina. I think we should look at the president's announcement from a holistic point of view. What needs to be done to stop the spread of COVID-19? It appears that there is advice that there is a lot of crowding in hotels and particularly in restaurants and bars, and that was a cause for concern. But we saw that since the time we went into consultations with the Ministry of Health, we developed protocols that were to ensure our places complied. We've been testing those protocols, and I can report here that in hotels, everything is fine. We are not seeing any crowding. We are not seeing people flouting the rules in hotels. And in a good number of the restaurants, we are also seeing a lot of compliance. However, there has been a few bad apples that have really messed up everything. So obviously, the decision is understood. Now, in terms of the timings of the restaurants, the way we plan ourselves is that we would take the final order at around 7 and start shutting down at 7:30. So what that means is that it reduces our working hours slightly lower. So the impact might be we will not be able to service dinner clients for the time being. But again, these directives have been given for the next 30 days. I don't think there is any cause for alarm. Let's see whether let's give it a chance. Let's see whether the infections will start dropping, because that's the main concern. The main concern is health and safety. We are also concerned about the health and safety of our clients and the health and safety of our staff. And we are going to do everything possible to keep our people healthy. Thanks, Regina.
I have appealed to the government to review that particular directive, and some of them are saying that with the closure of bars and the non-sale of alcohol in these outlets is going to gravely affect the hospitality industry and the industry in particular, because they had already stocked up. From where you sit, are you seeing an opportunity to have a review in regard to this particular directive that was issued yesterday by the president?
The immediate impact, obviously, is that some people will lose jobs, because, as you know, some of these restaurants operate on the daily take. So there will be some losses of jobs for sure. But listening to the president's speech yesterday, he was finding it very difficult to strike a balance between economic well-being and health and safety, and those two are actually very intertwined. If you have an unhealthy population, then the economy will not grow, and if you have a poor population, then health becomes a secondary issue. So this is a balance that, to tell you the truth, Regina, I'd hate to be in his position, because it's a balance that is really, really difficult to achieve. But in terms of the bar owners making an appeal, that is well understood, because obviously a good number of them had invested a lot of extra money in putting up the protocols that had been given by the Ministry of Health. And I would not blame them for feeling, a bit betrayed for trying everything only for one or two places to flout the rules, and then the rod hits everybody. So I would understand them. but at the same time, I think we should all look at this situation, decision. Is it the worst decision? There were other measures that were taken. You will recall that even churches had been closed for quite a while. You will recall that hotels have just started working since March. You remember we didn't have any flights coming in. The airspace has opened up just recently. We are looking at international flights coming in from the 1st of August. And even though the decision to shut down bars at the moment appears harsh, it may be for the greater good. So I think for now, we should try and support, even though we feel that we've lost quite a bit of investment. I think we should try and support the president's decision and see whether we can be able to reduce the number of infections, because we also don't want a situation whereby we'll have international travelers coming in and they are afraid because the numbers are rising. So we have to try and do everything to mitigate the situation at the moment. But you know, the bar owners, they have, I think they have two associations that deal with self-regulation, and I think they're better positioned to inform us on what they have done. But from the restaurants that I have seen, I saw that there is quite a lot of compliance, because we also do our own independent checks. But there are areas where we had problems, and where we had problems, we were encouraging our people to call in the authorities, but at times it wasn't always possible to get the police on site in good time. So let's see how it unfolds. It's 30 days, and it could make a very big difference.
Now, crossing over and just looking at the tourism, domestic tourism as it is, it said that hotels had closed, but now we are seeing a slow, opening up of the hotel industry. As we expect the, incoming flights from, the international market come next month, there's been talk, especially from the Ministry of Tourism, appealing to stakeholders to actually review their pricing downwards, so that locals can get to sample the hospitality services and products. But in a rejoinder from your umbrella organization, is that your stand is that the government to lower the taxes, then the pricing can actually go down. From where you sit, maybe you can, make us understand, especially at this time when the hospitality industry is really trying to stay afloat, and the domestic market is, likely to is the lifeline as it is. Then how do we strike a balance from where you sit?
Regina, first of all, let's start with what government has done. And you will recall we sat with government very early on, and the president himself took an unprecedented step of reducing VAT by 2%. That has never happened in the history of this country. He also did another great milestone. The next thing that he did through the Central Bank of Kenya was reduce interest rates and extend repayment periods for loans. The CS Tourism proposed a recovery package that was in the budget, was read to be about 3 billion shillings. I saw reports that there has been an improvement to 10 billion. I haven't seen the budget estimates yet on that. And many other things that the government did. So for us to turn around and indicate that the government has not done enough in terms of reduction of inputs is really not a fair statement to government. Now, what we are doing is that we've gotten together with the Kenya Tourism Board, and we are running promotional campaigns, and these are starting this coming week. We have we've always been a partner with the Equity Bank, and we are running a promotion with the Visa, the credit card holders. We've gotten into a partnership with Safaricom, and we'll be doing promotions. We've spoken to our members. If you have seen, there's a lot of deals coming through. The government also reduced park entry fees for national parks, all KWS parks, and we have seen an increase in the uptake of people visiting Nairobi National Park, Masai Mara, places like Samburu and Shaba and Isiolo. So we want to work in conjunction with government. If that statement was probably made without a full evaluation of what had been done by government, and it is our duty to ensure that we give these deals where available. Now, the other thing is that there's always been this notion that domestic tourism is expensive. And truthfully, Regina, it is not. We have products that run across the spectrum, from homestays to apartments to Airbnbs to hotels, and up to some boutique hotels which are very small, and because of the nature of their demand, then they're high and what they offer. But if you look at a place like Coast at the moment, we did flag off 3 airlines last week. Kenya Airways to Mombasa and Kisumu. We had East African to going out to Diani, and we had Safari Link going out to Diani. And all those planes were carrying loads of passengers that were all domestic, and they're all staying in our hotels. And the hotels are giving very, very affordable deals. So all you need to do is just counter check where the people are staying, and you will find that we are able to accommodate a good number of the domestic tourists. So it's not really a big issue, and it's not the first time that we've come up with promotions to attract members of the domestic market. We even do sales promotions externally, so it's not something that should be dominating the news. I saw a very good story yesterday on South African TV talking about the wildebeest migration taking place in Mara, and there was some good pictures. But the local press, what I saw in the local press was vultures dying. So we also need to come in as members of the Fourth Estate and support our promotional activities and give out the good stories that are taking place within some of these tourism spots.
As we wrap up this conversation, Mike, Kenya is expecting, to just lift the ban on international flights come next month, the 1st of August. And also the Ministry of Tourism is considering to do away with the 14-day quarantine for international arrivals. What is your take on that particular, thought? They have not exactly said it, but they are considering to do away with the 14-day mandatory quarantine for international arrivals. What's your take in light of the surging COVID-19 cases?
Like I said, Regina, we have worked through this. You remember we launched the standard operating procedures for the industry in Kenya. And this included airlines, tour operators, hotels, restaurants, national parks, and even transport. And we were even reaching out to taxis. And we worked on this document as a committee that had been appointed by CS Balala under the Ministry of Tourism. And that committee included a lot of input from the Ministry of Health. And when we developed these procedures, we agreed that we will require anybody coming into the country to have a COVID negative sort of certification, either from a recognized doctor back home or a recognized lab or clinic back home. And once we had that, and the airlines also had that requirement, then we did not really see the need of having somebody come into quarantine if they have only been tested like 72 hours before. And that requirement was removed from the standard operating procedures that we developed. Now, that is a position of the standard operating procedures. However, there's been announcements, conflicting announcements, one from CS Kagwe talking about quarantine, and one from CS Macharia talking about the lack of that requirement for quarantine. What is on paper is that the quarantine is not required. That's what is on paper on the standard operating procedures. So if there's a change, then we would seek the government's clarification. But I don't think it's a big problem, because what we were doing with that, the entire process was to find a safe zone right from the airport all the way to the circuit where the client is going and going back. And remember, Regina, most of our international visitors come here for a week with between 7, 10, and 14-day visits. So if you're booked to stay for 7 days and you start with a 14-day quarantine, then you require 21 days. And most people, especially at this time, may not be able to get out for 21 days. So this is what we are urging the government to just look at that COVID test pre-arrival and see whether it's enough. Then when you get here, we can take temperature checks. We can look at other, other tests, shortness of breath, like we've been told by the Ministry of Health, constant cough. Then if somebody is showing symptoms, then we could isolate them and give them the required treatment. But we're also seeing other countries around the world requiring that quarantine. And we think it's a bit ill-informed because if you already have a test, then there's really no need to put you through quarantine if you test negative.
Thank you very much. That is the CEO of the Kenya Association of Hotel Keepers, Mr. Mike Macharia, giving his opinion to President Kenyatta's directive yesterday that included, just all bars shall remain closed indefinitely, while eateries and restaurants are prohibited from selling alcohol. That says, and also they got the review of the timing now from 8 to 7 p.m. He says that as an industry player, well, this is just a wait-and-see game because they are in tandem with what government is doing, especially to spread the, to stem the spread of COVID-19. Thank you very much, Mike Macharia, for your time. Just a fun fact, or just a fact in regard to the Kenya Association of Hotel Keepers. This is an umbrella, organization that brings together hotels, lodges, and restaurants, as well as membership clubs and prominent airline caterers, whose common theme is to render services in the hospitality industry. Keep your views coming in regard to the president's speech yesterday and the directives that he gave and measures that were put in place to just stem the spread of COVID-19. As it is, yesterday in the last 24 hours, 440 Kenyans tested positive for COVID-19, bringing the total country caseload to 18,000 plus. We'll be keeping tabs on that and also following up on the other measures that the president issued yesterday. One of them is just having a meeting, or rather he directed that CS Education, George Magoha, convenes a meeting with all stakeholders just to clear away the doubt and uncertainty, especially from parents, as to when exactly the schools will reopen come 2021. This including tertiary institutions that were scheduled to reopen in September. We will be keeping tabs on that. Remember that we are live on various social media platforms, and you can log in and just get updated on stories that have been making headlines in the last 24 hours. Later on today is that we expect, to just get a decision as senators vote on the revenue sharing formula today. And we are going to be live and bring you that update as it happens. Remember, one of the options is that the CRA proposal is that puts emphasis on population versus the amended version in which counties will get what they were allocated in the fiscal year 2018-2019. Furthermore, we've had proponents and critics alike coming out either to support this particular proposed revenue sharing formula. And one of them is Deputy William Ruto, who seems not to have taken any side in particular, but has maintained that there needs to be a win-win situation in regard to, the formula. Further on is the outcome of today's Senate vote on the revenue sharing formula going to affect, the progress of the BBI bill. That is yet to be seen, with some proponents, especially within the Jubilee faction. Quoted there is, Jubilee whip Irongo Kangata saying that depending on the outcome of today's vote within the Senate in regard to that revenue allocation, proposal, then it might actually mean failure or success of the BBI in terms of passing the bill. Now, some in the proposal as it is, it's going to have casualties and also top gainers. Some of the gainers include 28 counties drawn from Western, Central, and Rift Valley, while some of the losers in regard to the revenue sharing includes 19 counties from the coast, eastern and northern Kenya. 316.5 billion shillings is the monies that counties are expected to share for the fiscal year 2020-2021. Just summing up what we've been having for you this morning. Remember, we have so much in stock for you, and we're also going to be focusing on, the issue of teenage pregnancy as well as, FGM. At a time, when stakeholders have said that children are under attack. The reports that we have is that, according to the National Council on Population and Development, is that 2 out of 5 teenagers in Kenya are either young mothers or are pregnant since the COVID-19 pandemic. Remember, Kenya confirmed, or rather reported its first case on the 13th of March 2020, and during that period, the statistics that we have from the National Council on Population and Development indicate that 2 out of 5 teenagers in Kenya are either young mothers or are pregnant. Now, with children expected to be at home till January 2021, the cases are bound to go higher. And as such, we interrogate the causes and the necessary measures to put in place to ensure that we secure the lives of the future leaders. All right. And if we do not arrest this situation, indeed, we're bound to get into a difficult situation with young mothers, and and these children may just end up not going back to school come next year. That is a topic of discussion that we're going to be handling in not too long. I'll be joined by various guests to just put that into perspective. How about we take a short break? When we return, that is the item we're going to be dealing with. Channel 1, and this goes Good Morning Kenya. As we had alluded to earlier, we want to talk about the issues, to interrogate the causes and necessary response measures, to just put in place to stem this issue that we're dealing with, is that the issue of teenage pregnancy. Now, according to the National Council on Population and Development, is that 2 out of every 5 teenagers in Kenya are either young mothers or are pregnant since Kenya confirmed its first case of COVID-19. That is in the month of March. Now, and this is expected, these numbers are expected to grow since children are going to be home up until, next year. Joining me in this for this conversation is Dominic Kimaita to just help us just understand then what we can do to ensure that we arrest this situation. Dominic Kimaita, good morning and thank you for your time.
Good morning. It's actually Robert Kiseda.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much for having me.
Robert Kiseda. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming on board and just to help us understand this situation and what we can do in light of this current situation that we find ourselves as a country. From where you sit, why do you think we have this increase of numbers, of teenage pregnancies during this time?
First of all, there are key issues that have played into this situation. The first one is, of course, the closure of schools and stay-at-home order. What that basically means is that most students are now at home, and because they are at home, there has been a surge in sexual activities that leads to issues around teenage pregnancy. However, we must also be careful not to label this as a COVID-19 issue, because whereas COVID-19 has exacerbated the situation, issues of teenage pregnancy and child marriage have been expanding over in the last period of years. If you look at the data from the Ministry of Health, for example, from 2015 to now, we have seen that there has been exponential increase in number of teenage pregnancies. So whereas COVID-19 has indeed exacerbated and revealed the situation, teenage pregnancies have been here with us, but as a society, we have not been feeling free to talk about some of these difficult conversations and issues.
Very well said. Now, with this current situation that we find ourselves in, then what role can stakeholders play to just tackle this issue of teenage pregnancies? And when I talk about stakeholders, I'm looking at, parents are going to be with these children for the next 6 months or so as government, works on its school calendar, at this time when we're stemming the spread of COVID-19. What active role can stakeholders, parents, teachers, as well as the community play to tackle the issue of teenage pregnancies?
One of the most critical interventions is on sexuality education. And if you look at the Ministry of Health model that they have given on sexuality education can be provided at home with parents, it can be provided at community level, it can be provided at facility level, and can also be provided at school level. And now that schools are closed, it is very, very important that parents are able to have honest conversations with children about issues of sex and sexuality. If you look at most home setups, is that these are very difficult conversations that parents are not willing and able to have with their children. They have sort of left this role to the teachers, and now that children are at home, it has become now even more increasingly important for parents to have conversations on sex and sexuality, for parents to be able to have honest and free dialogue, because when children and young people have access to information, then they are able to make informed choices on their sexuality. The other thing that is important is also on the issue of child protection. We have seen a surge of, especially now looking at socioeconomically disadvantaged backgrounds, where girls, for example, who are coming from poor homes have to resort to, for example, having sex for border rides, having sex for pads, having sex for meals, having sex for some phones or tokens. And it's also important that security agencies, local administration, and communities are able to come together and also hold perpetrators of these human violations responsible for their actions.
This issue, the debate of talking about talking about sexuality opening has been quite, a debate of sorts with religious sects, that there's no need, especially to have, these introduced in the curriculum. From where you sit then, when you talk about the issues of, at what age, is it the right time to have, matters of sexuality introduced, in our school curriculum?
The first thing is that if you look at Ministry of Health data, it reveals that girls and boys are starting to engage in sex at a very young age. Almost 50% of boys and girls have had sex by the time they are 17. If you look at a further 20% have had sex by the time they are 15. So the issue is young people are already having sex, and that is the truth of the situation. So as a society, as parents, why then should we hide our head in the sand? Why should we be able to talk to them about these issues even before they start having sex? Because, for example, for a lot of girls, boys and girls actually, the first time they engage in sex, there's always the risk of teenage pregnancies, there's the risk of STIs, there's the risk of HIV. So why then would we wait for them to have sex first before having this honest and candid conversation with them? And that is why it's important that young people and adolescents are able to have this sexuality education. The most important thing to note is that this sexuality education needs to be age appropriate. Of course, there is information that a 5-year-old, for example, can be able to get. There's information that a 10-year-old should be able to get. There's information that a 15-year-old should be able to get, because as they evolve, they require different kinds of information. So, for example, information like body parts, for example, If you look at children, for example, as young as 6 and 7, there's this childhood games, for example, that they call either Chababa and Chamama, these childhood games that they play. So it's at that level already, it's important for them to know that these are my body parts and this is how I should be able to protect myself. This can also be able to help young girls and young boys be able to even evade predators, for example. So, for example, if you say that this person touched me in this kind of place, if they have the right information on what kind of part, for example, they were touched, then that can be able to even help them talk to their parents, talk to their community members, talk to their caregivers about some of the violations, and then that can also help hold perpetrators responsible and accountable.
Other than just barriers, religious barriers, we have issues of tradition and culture. We're still inherently, African in culture, and talking about sex has always been frowned upon and thought of as taboo. In the 21st century, then what can parents do? We used to have aunties talking to the young girls and uncles advising the young boys. But within the social strata as it is, with the urban migration, this is not so. Then would you say that this is also affecting, our discussion, or rather in terms of our knowledge for this, knowledge among these young people about reproductive health and what they can do to just remain responsible?
Yeah, that's true. That's definitely true. And one of the issues that I like that you pointed out to is that in the traditional African families and societies, there's a system that was deliberately set up for young people to be able to have sexuality education. For example, as you mentioned, young girls could sit with their aunties and their grandmas and they could get this information. Now, because of the societies that we live in that is increasingly urbanized and increasingly nuclear, you find that most of the time it is just either the father, the mother, and the children who are living in sometimes, for example, in urban centers, who are living in some small rooms. So you find the truth is that sometimes you find that if they're living in some small room and the parents are engaging in sex, for example, the children who are there at that place, for example, are getting some kind of information. But then nobody is willing to have the conversation to talk to them. And that is why I think that we need to strengthen all the 4 models of sexuality education. The first one that we have mentioned is the one on the community setup, whereby if you're not free to talk to your child about sex, for example, can your brother, can your auntie, can your uncle, can your grandmother have this conversation? The other one is on the school setup, which is very, very critical because most of the time children are at school. The other one is the facility setup. If a child, for example, has gone for whatever it is that they are going to find at the hospital, will they find someone there who will be able to give them comprehensive information? And the fourth one, and most critical one, especially now, is the virtual-based model, whereby young people can be able to access information through the net. If you look at Google Zeitgeist results, for example, that monitors the kind of information that young people are looking for online, one of the key issues that young people are looking for online, if you look at from trends from 2012 up to now, one of the key questions is what is sex? So young people are going on the net to find out what is sex. So that is why it's critical for the government and partners to be able to provide accurate information across all these platforms to enable young people to be able to make informed decisions on their own sexuality.
Now, how has lack, of access to sexual reproductive services affected or rather exacerbated the issue of teenage pregnancies?
If you look at, according to the WHO, young people require services that are provided in a friendly manner. So friendly manner, it looks at time, for example. Is this time appropriate for young people? Is it provided by the right personnel who are trained? Is it provided in a manner that is acceptable to young people? So if you look at most of the health facilities, for example, that you go to, there is limited confidentiality and privacy. You will go to a hospital, for example, and then you will find some queue. People are there, people that you respect, for example, your aunties, your grandmothers, they're there, and you are all in this line going to antenatal, for example, and it becomes a lot of young people shy away from such situations, so they would rather not access services because the services are not friendly. So currently in Kenya, only 10% of facilities provide comprehensive youth and adolescent-friendly services. So there's a guideline that has been developed by the Ministry of Health to tell healthcare workers how they should be able to provide services that are friendly to adolescents. So if these young people are not able to access these services, then, for example, if they require things like condoms or contraceptives or just information, they would rather just not go at all. If they would find, for example, that their auntie is the next person on the line, then it doesn't make sense for them to go for such a service. So they would rather stay away. And that's why it's important for the Ministry of Health to ensure that they improve the facilities to be able to provide adolescent and youth-friendly services. And this can be able to enable young people to get services that are acceptable to them, services that are provided in the right manner, and most importantly, services that are affordable and also that respects the privacy and confidentiality of adolescents and young people.
Now, the reports that we got, especially from the county, indicate that a total of around 20,828 girls between the age of 14 and 19 have become mothers, while others older between the age of 15 and 19 at 24,106 are pregnant or already mothers. These are worrying statistics. But how prepared are, counties at this point to just handle this issue of teenage pregnancies?
I think for me, the first thing is that we are not having an honest conversation as a country. If we are not having an honest conversation, then we cannot be able to develop appropriate responses. If for some reason people are getting pregnant, girls are getting pregnant, girls, and are getting married, and for some reason we are still believing that adolescent girls and young people are not having sex. So the first thing that we need to do is to have an honest conversation. When we have an honest conversation, then we are able to develop county-specific responses that uphold human rights. So one of the issues that we have seen is that there has indeed been a lot of progress in different counties. I will give you the example of Migori County, for example. Migori County has developed an adolescent and youth multi-sectoral plan that brings together the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Finance, Planning, all these people together to see, as a county, what do we do going forward. There are other counties as well that have been able to do this. Mombasa, for example, has done the same. Nairobi is just finalizing their plan. So the first thing is, what plans have the county put in place in order to address this kind of issues? And the truth is, different counties have different contexts. I will give you an example of my home county of Homa Bay, for example. And Homa Bay has among the highest teenage pregnancy rates in this county. So if you compare, for example, Homa Bay, and let's say, for example, a county, let's say like Kirinyaga, you will realize that they have different issues, for example. A county like Kajiado may be having more prevalences of FGM, for example, whereas a county like Kisumu may be having more prevalences of HIV/AIDS. And therefore, it is important for counties to have their own plans, which is based on the actual national plan, whereby they will say that for the next 5 years, these are our priorities as a county. We are going to develop this kind of friendly services. We are going to ensure that we set up centers that give information to young people, whatever it is, and whatever it is that is acceptable and contextualized to their local setting.
Talking about what governments can do, both national and at the county level, what are stakeholders for you as the Network for Adolescent and Youth of Africa? What are you doing to just about the high rise in teenage pregnancy within your capacity?
So one of the key things that we are doing so far is we are conducting media campaigns through social media to be able to inform young people about issues around sex and sexuality. We are also talking to policymakers on issues around developing appropriate legislative and policy frameworks at the county that can be able to support adolescent sexual and reproductive health and rights. We are also supporting dialogues with young people themselves, because for us, we believe that it is important for us to support young people to speak about their issues themselves. And so we are having conversations, and we are supporting young people to ask their local decision makers what it is that they want at their level. One of the things that we have also just launched is we have launched an anthology on the lived realities of girls in Kajiado. So we went to the communities and we collected stories, and these are real stories of real girls, because there is always this argument whenever you're trying to bring up conversations. People always say that, but we don't know anyone who has teenage pregnancy, for example. So one of the key issues that we are doing is documenting. We are documenting this kind of stories so that we are able to bring them to policymakers and say, hey, we have been using these statistics, but you have been saying that these people do not exist. So these are the faces. These are the faces of the girls. These are the faces of the boys. And this is exactly what we want you to do. So we are trying to bring as much evidence as possible to persuade, inform, and motivate decision makers to take action on adolescent sexual and reproductive health and rights.
Now, there is a case in the story that the media is cleanly focusing on. A story that is taking place in Baringa, where Baringa teens are trading sex for money to buy sanitary towels. This comes at a time when we are having a rise in gender-based violence, issues of early marriage, especially where teenagers are concerned, and the issue of female genital mutilation. How then do we access justice for these girls?
The first thing that is important is that we need to ensure that we implement the different policies and legislations that we have on these issues. We have, for example, the Sexual Offences Act 2006 that talks about issues of such kinds of violations. We have the Female Genital Mutilation Prohibition Act of 2011. We have the Children's Act. We have the Marriage Act of 2014. So we have legislation that have been put in place to address this kind of issues. The issue now becomes enforcement. And if you look at all these kind of frameworks and policies and legislation that we have, they have an implementation matrix that says that what is the role of the chiefs, for example? What is the role of the police, for example? What is the role of community elders? What is the role of the MCA? What is the role of the governor? And I think the first thing that needs to happen is that we need to hold people accountable to respecting, protecting, and fulfilling adolescent sexual and reproductive health and rights. The other key important thing is as a community, because most of these violations happen at the community level. What is the role of the community? Are they speaking about these issues? Are they reporting the people who are responsible for these violations, or they are keeping it hush-hush and exchanging goats in the process? So we need to hold people accountable at all levels, whether they are families, their parents, whether they are chiefs, they are police, they are national government officials, or county government people. At the end of the day, the first key thing is implementing and enforcing the legislation and the policy framework that we have in Kenya, which talks about these issues in a very detailed manner.
Now, we've had female genital mutilation is actually prohibited or rather outlawed in the country, but we'll still see some communities are still continuing to perform this heinous act. Why do you think this is so? Is it that we lacks in regulation and implementation, or do we have a loophole in the justice system as far as this issue is concerned?
That's indeed very, very true, that whereas FGM has been outlawed and it's been illegal, there are still very many communities that are practicing it. And what we found out when we were doing our documentation on the Stories Zetu anthology, what we found out is that there are parents who are actually giving their girls to be circumcised. So at that level, the first people who are the violators are the parents. So then the other problem is that at the household level, if the parent is the one violating, then these girls have nowhere else to go for justice. So it's very, very important at the community level to, what we have seen is to work with champions and whistleblowers and people who can inform about what is happening, and at least then actions can be taken. We have seen very progressive police officers, very progressive administration officials who are actually enforcing the law the way it should be. But indeed, there's still a very, very big problem of culture and how the culture, particularly the culture of silence on some of these issues. So whereby I may not agree with what you're doing, but then I feel like, oh, you're my uncle, for example, and if I report you, then you'll be taken to jail, or this kind of village dispute resolution mechanisms, whereby after this kind of violations, then people sit down, for example, and the fine is a goat. This kind of things violate human rights, and it's very, very important that then we ask ourselves, what is the role of the law in addressing this kind of grievous offenses?
Now, is there a correlation from your research and your survey? Is there a correlation between poverty and, early or rather teenage pregnancies?
Yeah, there's a very big correlation. If you look at the Kenya Demographic Health Survey of 2014, it revealed that particularly girls who are coming from socioeconomically disadvantaged backgrounds or poor households, for example, are twice or thrice more likely to get pregnant while they are children. So that's the first fact. The second fact also, and this is a practical concern that I alluded to earlier, is, for example, if you are the kind of, especially in urban settings, whereby you have parents and children living sort of in the same room, then it means that the parents, for example, do not have privacy and the children don't have privacy. And this kind of leads to a situation whereby girls and boys, for example, observe things from their parents. That is the other thing. Then the other thing also, as you mentioned earlier, is on the issue of, for example, if parents and caregivers are not able to afford things such as pads, for example, then the girls become additionally vulnerable to issues, to predators, for example, who want sex in return for pads, either sex in return for boda rides, sex in return for food, and all of this. So indeed, poverty is a critical issue that accentuates, exacerbates, and perpetuates some of these violations.
Before I let you go, and I would want to seek your opinion on the way forward in regard to this issue of teenage pregnancies, I'd want to just sample some of the views that we have already gathered on social media. This is at Dennis, that is Mwalimu Dennis Mwina, says, I'm from Riverside, Nairobi. The fact is, if parents or the guardians are yet to talk about it in black and white to their boys and girls, then my friend, installation of that sexual education is nothing. That's the opinion of Dennis Mwima on Twitter. In your own opinion, Robert Aseda, and also your experience working with that particular network, then what can we do going forward to arrest this situation?
Thank you. The first thing that we need to do is, as I said, have an honest conversation about these issues as a country. When we have an honest conversation about whatever issue that it is as a country, then we are able to develop local solutions to our own issues. That is the first thing that we need to do. If we are able to agree that there is indeed evidence that there's a lot of teenage pregnancies in this country, there's a lot of child marriage, there's a lot of unsafe abortions, there's a lot of FGM, then that is the first step. Then the second step is the issue that Kenyans like to ask, that do you know somebody, for example? Do you know? And that is the question that we need to ask ourselves. And the truth is, most families and most people know a lot of girls who have been violated at a young age. It's just that they choose not to talk about it. So we need to see the evidence and follow the evidence where it takes us. The third thing is on the issue of sexuality education. And I agree with what Mwalimu said earlier on Twitter, is that we need to have a sexuality education framework that respects human rights, that is universal and is also based on human rights standards and practices, but at the same time is also able to be contextualized to our own settings. So the first thing is we need to have sexuality education in churches, for example. What is the role of churches, for example? Can they have conversations when they are doing their sermons? Can they bring about these issues and create an environment in which the clergy and the girls can be able to have honest conversations about some of these issues? What is the role of the Ministry of Health in this conversation? What is the role of the Ministry of Education in this conversation? What is the role of communities in this conversation? The other thing is we talk about policies, but then if we have these policies and we do not have sufficient budgets that have been allocated to them, then they just become papers gathering dust somewhere. So it's important that we allocate resources. If you look at the Ministry of Health, currently the allocation to health is around 7.5% across over the last 4 years, 7.2, 7.5, thereabout. But then Kenya committed to allocating at least 15% of its budget to health. So if there is no budget that is allocated for some of these critical issues, then these plans that we have become just that, plans. And lastly, and most importantly, it is important to involve adolescents and young people in these conversations. There is always this school of thought that, it's the adults and parents and all these kind of professionals and technocrats who know best. but the people who are living those lives are these adolescents and young people. And how do we bring them into the conversation and ask them, what do you think? They can be able to give us insights, and from those insights, then we can be able to develop appropriate responses that are friendly and, most importantly, are acceptable to them.
Very well. Thank you very much, Robert Asenda, there for your time. That is Robert Asenda, who works with the Network for Adolescent and Youth of Africa. The take home this morning is that we need to have age-appropriate discussions on matters sexuality if we are at all going to address this issue of teenage pregnancies. Some of the statistics that we have gotten here is that the National Council of Population Development says that 2 out of every 5 teenagers in Kenya are either young mothers or are pregnant since the COVID-19 pandemic. However, this is not something that we need to refer to as a COVID-19 issue, as from our guest there, because reports indicate that teenage pregnancies tend to increase during the school holidays than during the school session. A challenge there to various stakeholders, including parents and guardians during this time, as well as the community, is that issues of teenage pregnancy is that we need to look at children, and they are bringing as a communal responsibility, despite the fact that we are living in the 21st century. Back in the day, as Robert Asenda has mentioned, is that, the young boys had mentors among their uncles to just tell them what it requires of them, or rather what it means to be a boy growing up. Back then, well, the ladies, the young girls, had their aunts and grandmothers to just direct them as to what really it means to be, a young girl and growing to a responsible woman. It's a high time we went back to our roots and culture. And talking about roots and culture, the issue of FGM has been outlawed, but various communities right now are still practicing this heinous act. And maybe it's, from August's opinion, is that it's a high time we also took a keen look into where the loopholes are, and also just more awareness and sensitization as to the impact that FGM has, on the girl who is undergoing the cut, especially in future. That has been our guest, Robert Asenda of the Network for Adolescent and Youth in Africa, trying to address the causes and the necessary measures that we need to put in place to arrest the issue of teenage pregnancies. County statistics between January and May indicated that 4,000 girls aged below 19 years were reported pregnant in Machakos County. And Nakuru County has recorded 1,748 teenage pregnancies, while Kajiado County has recorded 1,523 cases. Kericho, 1,006. Homa Bay, 957, while Garissa is 901. While other counties such as Lamu, Embu, Elgeyo Marakwet each reported about 50 cases of teenage pregnancy. We are already in this situation, and children are going to be home until January 2021. Early indications shows that teenage pregnancies are on the rise during, holidays and not during the school calendar. Now that the children are going to be home up until next year, you and I, as a guardian, need to ensure that we have these candid conversations about matters sexuality, age-appropriate sexuality discussions. This is just one of the recommendations that has been given by various stakeholders who have come on board to tackle the issue of FGM and teen pregnancies that we are currently experiencing. Statistics: 2 out of 5 teenagers in Kenya are either young mothers or are pregnant since the month of March. Well, we take a short, we'll be crossing over to the other side of studio with my colleague Dorina Range as she continues with our interactive segment. I'll be moving away from matters FGM and teenage pregnancy. We're going to be talking about an issue in health. So do keep it right here. We value your feedback, and if my producer can just allow me to just go back and look at the feedback that we have so far received in regard to what we have been airing for you since 7 a.m. this morning. We have a tweet here saying that it is a high time. This is Jasper saying that we need to, we need to adopt measures where we can freely speak about matters sexuality if we are to stem the spread of teenage pregnancy. That is Jasper on Twitter. Further on is the review that engaging teens in sexual education is a positive way to curb early teenage pregnancies. That's a take home from our guest this morning. That is Robert Asenda. Keep your tweets coming. My Twitter handle is at Ray Manyara. Doreen Arange is at Doreen Arange on Twitter, and the official station handle is at KBC Channel 1 News. Keep your feedback coming in regard to the stories that we are highlighting for you, and also issues that you want highlighted in this broadcast in future. We cross over to the other side.
Right, in time for our last conversation this Tuesday morning, we want to talk about general surgeries performed on patients. So what exactly do we mean when we talk about general surgeries, and especially during this COVID-19 time? For those patients that might have scheduled surgeries or even just any checkup in the hospital, how then do they go about this? Is it a time when people can fear? What can be done at least to remove that fear? Joining me on set this morning is Dr. Brian Mulando, Head Medix Bliss Healthcare Limited, who will be helping us understand more about this. Dr. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you doing?
Good.
All right. Now, before we get deeper into, even the COVID-19 aspect, first of all, when we talk about general surgeries, what that brings in mind is that there could be other forms of surgeries. So just for the benefit of our viewers, when you say general surgeries, what exactly do we mean, and what comprises of this kind of surgeries?
General surgery basically means any other surgery that is not a specialized surgery. Okay, these are surgeries to do with the abdomen, surgeries to do with the rest of the body, besides heart surgeries, which are more specialized, brain surgeries, which are more specialized, spinal surgeries, which are more specialized. Basically, all the other surgeries are general surgeries. When you speak about general surgery, usually we divide them into two.
Okay.
Yeah? They're what we call minor surgeries and major surgeries.
So these fall under general?
Yes, they fall under general.
Okay.
All other surgeries that are specialized are also major surgeries. Okay. There can be minor surgeries like to do with the skin, to do with the muscles. Okay. Those are minor surgeries. They are called minor because they don't necessarily, you don't have to make someone sleep completely. So the only difference between minor and major is where you have to make someone sleep completely or partially. We have seen in females when you want to operate, maybe to remove, to do a cesarean section, to deliver by surgery. So we inject at the back. So that is also considered a major surgery because it's
considered a major one, but still falls under the general category.
But for cesarean is a little specialized because it's a maternity surgery done by obstetricians. So that is more of a specialized surgery, but can also be done by other doctors, precisely to say medical doctors, medical officers can also conduct that surgery. They are licensed to conduct that kind of surgery. So in brief, in summary, that is general surgery. Any other surgery that does not involve specialized organs. Yes.
Any other surgery that doesn't involve specialized organs falls under the general category of surgeries.
Yes.
Now, in your line of duty as a doctor, probably even as a surgeon, what would you say is the most common kind of surgery that even you've performed in your line of duty, and what makes it common?
One of the commonest surgeries is there are things we see on human beings, small swellings, yeah, that are done, especially if you go up country. Let's not look at Nairobi alone, because Nairobi has more specialized surgeries, but let's look at the broader country, up country.
Yes.
If you go to Marsabit, if you go to Kakuma, if you go to Nyeri, there are those surgeries that are easily performed by the medical officers. Okay, these are surgeries to do like lymphomas. These are swellings that happen on the skin, below the skin. They are non-carcinogenic tumors. That they are benign tumors. These are non-carcinogenic. They are not spreading in nature, but they grow in one area. So those surgeries are very common and they can be worked on. Other surgeries that require
and they don't really need that specialized.
They don't require the specialized surgery, and they just require some putting some anesthetic agents around the area where you're going to operate.
Right.
Okay, so you don't need to make someone sleep. It's that simple. Just require minor theater or a side procedure room, and then conduct it safely. The other commonest is appendicitis. So appendicitis, there's a part of the intestines we call an appendix.
Yes.
Okay, so very commonly that part gets infected, and when it is infected, it therefore has to be removed because it has no major role in the body, in the digestive system. So that is the other commonest one, and it is a simple procedure that will take you probably 1 hour, 1 to 1.5 hours, and it is done. Although it is majorly done under general anesthesia, where you make someone sleep completely. Yes.
Now, before we look at probably other types of common surgeries, what makes that part to be infected that you just mentioned?
You know, if you look at its location in the body, in the large gut, it's a small, it's almost like a finger, small finger like this. Yeah. So as the food moves through, so anything like a stone, anything like a mass, a stone. If you eat rice, you know, rice has a lot of stones. People who eat a lot of rice tend to get this problem. So these stones tend to drop into that. So once they accumulate, they block the whole lumen, and then fluid starts accumulating, and then infection sets in. So you start having symptoms of pain in the abdomen. So when we examine you, then diagnose and do an ultrasound. We find it's that, then we have to just cut it out.
Then does that mean that you have to avoid rice or just take it in limited portions?
No. Actually, when you're taking rice, it's good to buy clean rice.
Okay,
That's
so that
one.
is the whole idea.
Yes.
Not doing completely away with it.
Yes, this rice that people go and put on the ground, and then they just pick up country,
Should be
basically
very
the
cautious
villages.
about
Yeah,
it.
they just collect and then go and cook. You have to sort it very well to remove all the small stones. Yeah, or buy rice that is already packed and well sorted. Yeah, that can help minimize this problem.
Okay, so the idea is to get clean kind of food, at least to avoid some of
Yes.
these complications that may lead someone to this kind of surgeries.
Sure.
Now, there's another thing I want us to talk about. This is in regards to circumcision, because it's also a part of surgery. And yesterday on the papers, we had the story of the Bukusu culture, that is in western part, where they still perform the traditional kind of circumcision. As a doctor, what would you say about this? What is your take? Is it advisable? Is it right, given that we have modernized ways which might be safer?
You know, there's always a debate between culture and modern day medicine.
Okay.
And this debate, when you go to these villages where these kind of practices are happening, they keep saying, you know, for you to become a man, you must go through this kind of circumcision. But times have changed. In some areas that practice circumcision, like the central region, they are doing it safely in hospitals. Okay. They go through churches.
So still doing it, but in a safe way.
In a safe way. Okay.
Yes.
The danger with what is being done on the other side is they are sharing. You know, when you share the instruments that you're using from one person to another, there's a risk of transmission of diseases. Common one is HIV, which we all know about. So we have, as health practitioners, as counties also, I know, they have continuously spoken out clearly against this kind of practice, and we keep encouraging parents to bring their children to hospitals to be circumcised. Circumcision is also a general surgery procedure.
Also falls under the general category of
yes,
surgery.
general surgery, but does not also involve making someone sleep. So we just inject the drugs around where you're going to operate, and then you do the operation. But it's more safer. We have seen other cultures shift to medical safe practice of circumcision. Yeah, and I think this is where we need to go, and we shall keep continuing to encourage people in that region. And all of us are working towards that to ensure that they adopt the new way of safe circumcision.
Safe circumcision. So you're going to keep continuing to encourage people in that region. So again, from your perspective as a doctor, would you say that the major problem then is that it's just that aspect of culture that is making especially persons from that area not to embrace? Because what you're mentioning is also the health risks that come with this kind of circumcision, yet we know there's a right and a proper way of performing this surgery.
You know, it's people who just lack some knowledge, you know. It's a culture change. Okay.
So it also boils down to knowledge.
Exactly.
Okay.
You know, culture is so deeply rooted amongst Africans.
Yes.
Okay. It's just like telling someone, write with this hand, yeah, or make your signature with this hand, and then they tell you now sign with this one. Yeah.
Very difficult.
It will be very difficult.
Yeah.
So anytime you need to achieve change, it's painful, it's slow, but sure. Okay. Great strides have been reached in terms of safe circumcision. Okay, like I've said, in the central region, I have seen circumcision is happening safely in hospitals. They no longer do the cultural circumcision where they're sharing the same instruments to work to circumcise every other boy. You know, it took time. So through continuous education to the elders, through laws also, policy. If the government comes out and probably abolishes or comes up with a policy that will be against this kind of traditional circumcision and ensures that if you are going to practice it, it is outlawed, then this kind of practice will end. But as medics in the healthcare industry, we shall continuously speak positive about circumcision in hospitals, as we discourage the traditional way of circumcision.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, and I mean, that's fair enough because, again, just the way you're mentioning that the health risks, yet there could be a good and an alternative way of doing it, which is, again, more healthy and also more beneficial to these persons. Now, let's talk about something else, the emergency and the urgent kind of surgeries. When you talk about that, what exactly do we mean and what comprises of the urgent ones and the emergency kind of surgeries?
You know, by definition, an emergency is something that cannot wait. Okay, it's a life-threatening.
It's a matter of there and then.
Yes, it's a life-threatening condition.
Yes.
Okay, by definition, in a simple way, it's a life-threatening condition that requires urgent, immediate intervention. I'll give an example.
Yes.
If someone collapses, for example, okay, they have been standing, and all of a sudden they collapse.
Yeah.
And there are many causes that might make someone collapse. One of it might be low blood sugar, or high blood sugar, for example. So this kind of emergencies could be bad if it happens in a place where you have no medical personnel around to try and intervene. Okay, and that's why people die, even of simple things like low blood sugar, which can simply be managed by injecting someone with some few mils of glucose, okay, so the person can get up. That is an emergency.
Yes.
If your blood sugar goes below 2, below 3, and you collapse, it is an emergency.
That makes that case an emergency case.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, an urgency means there is an impending danger to your health.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes.
That is an urgency. And I'll give you an example. You know, when your blood pressures, let me use another example, which is common. When your blood pressure...
Something at least viewers can be able to understand.
Viewers
what
can
exactly
able to understand,
mean?
yes. When your pressure goes high,
yes,
okay, there is a limit beyond which if it reaches there, we tell you, you are at risk of getting a stroke. Okay? A stroke could be a bleed in your head. So if your blood pressure goes beyond 170, you know, you are at risk of developing a stroke by a bleed because of high blood pressure. So it is an impending, it's the situation where there's an impending danger. If nothing is done to bring it or to reverse it, then you'll go into an emergency.
Into an emergency.
Yes.
Now, you talked about the pressure issue, which just brings me to my next question. Again, that, just for the benefit of our viewers, because oftentimes you'll hear someone saying, I'm having a lot of stress, just bringing my pressure up. So what exactly causes someone to have this pressure, and how can someone avoid them so that they don't get into that point where they'll have to go, you know, on under surgery or something of the sort just to help, you know, cure that? What brings about the pressure, and how can people avoid that?
You know, pressure is something that does not just come suddenly. Okay, there are many contributing factors.
Okay.
And pressure simply means the heart is pumping at a faster rate against a resistance. For example,
yes,
let me put it in a simpler format. The blood vessels are lumens, or they are pipes that transmit blood. Okay, over time, these blood vessels, as we eat a lot of fat, a lot of chips, a lot of these things people love eating, they accumulate in these pipes that transport blood.
Again, we go back to the aspect of food.
Yes.
Okay.
So when the pipes get corroded, just like when you have a metallic pipe that is transporting water, over time it will rust inside.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
And the pipe, the lumen of the pipe will become small. So because the lumen has become small, okay, the heart has to use a lot of force to push blood through this small pipe, which was bigger. Now it has become small because there are a lot of cholesterol and all these things that are in that lumen. So that causes pressure. So that pumping force of the heart is what we call pressure. Okay? And that's how pressure comes about. So when someone is maybe stressed, okay, there are stress hormones. Now these stress hormones will indirectly impact on the heart. They'll tell the heart there is an immense danger, you have to pump. So the heart will start pumping at a fast rate, giving you that kind of unnecessary pressure. but it's usually controlled once the person is in a calm situation. Usually we don't have to manage it with drugs.
Okay.
Yeah? Yes.
So at least also
as long as we know it is not pressure that has, as long as we know it is pressure that has stemmed out of stress, then we need to manage the stress, the cause, rather than giving drugs.
Okay. I think that was very important to be clarified because, you know, just also stress can also be a contributor and also better ways for people to learn how to manage that. Now, keeping up with the urgent kind of emergencies, I also was reading an article which was saying that trauma is also one of the urgent kind of, surgeries. So I just want us to understand, when you talk of trauma, what exactly makes it so urgent and what is the leading cause of that? Because again, also just like pressure, you'd hear some people saying, because of A, B, and C, and D, I feel like I'm traumatized. I just can't handle. I feel like things are just happening a lot, so I feel I'm traumatized. So I want you to explain to us what exactly does, bring about that, and what makes it an urgent cause, an urgent kind of surgery.
Trauma is an English word. Yeah, like you hear people speak. I'm traumatized. Okay, it's an English word, but in the medical circles, trauma is something else.
It's something entirely different.
Slightly different from what in English, usual English terms, it's more of a feeling, yeah. Based on the same example you have given, I'm traumatized. It's more of a feeling, which you can't touch, which you can't see. Okay, in medical circles, trauma is a condition. Okay, I'll call it a condition. A condition that comes, for example, if you have an accident. Okay. You have had an accident, a road traffic accident, and you are a trauma patient. So the reason why it is an urgence, it falls in between. Okay, there's a thin line between an urgence, and emergence when you're a trauma patient. Okay. And I'll try and explain the two.
Yeah.
So when we say it is an emergency, this is someone whose life is threatened completely, that if you don't intervene immediately, you'll lose this person. Okay? For example,
that is what makes it urgent?
That is an emergency
case.
Emergency case. Okay? Yes. That if you don't intervene immediately,
something will happen.
This person will pass away. Not just something will happen, he will pass away. Die. Okay? He'll actually die if you don't intervene. Okay. This is a person who might have a bleeding in the brain.
Wow.
Okay?
So it's that really serious?
Yes, because of the knock of the vehicle. Yeah, he may get a fracture on the skull and is bleeding in the brain. So you urgently have to go into theater and open up and close the bleed. Okay? Yeah. That person will pass away if no intervention is done. Now, an urgence is where the person who has had an accident, okay, is walking, okay, but not stable. That is a person you want to examine and do some investigations to see, to check on all his systems, organ systems, to see if they are okay. Okay? Is an urgent person, but if not attended to, will go into another emergency situation.
Right.
Yeah, we'll proceed into an emergency situation. So that is an urgent person, is stable, but requires to be attended to and examined properly. Yeah, to exclude any damage, internal damage. Yes, so that is an urgent person. Okay.
And the other one is an emergency.
The other one is an emergency who has already shown a complication by examination. You see, this is the most likely complication, is bleeding in the brain. We urgently need to go to theater, open up, close the bleed. Yes.
Well, okay, now I think now it really now makes sense, at least to understand when you talk about urgency cases, what exactly do we mean when you talk about emergency cases?
Exactly.
What it means. I think you've really well expounded on that. Now let's look at the painful kind of surgery, because again, from me, just from that layman's perspective, you'd expect and you'd think, if it's a surgery, it has to be painful, especially afterwards, while you're trying to nurse the wound. But I want to understand that there are painful kind of surgery and there are those that are quite less painful. What brings about that? Or is that even true?
Thank you, Doreen. Let me just give a brief. When surgery started, so many years, an individual used to be tied on a table. Yeah, no anesthesia was happening.
Nothing at all?
Nothing at all, and they would hold you and the doctor would cut. And the person who did the first surgery was not even a doctor.
Wow.
But as we have gone...
That looks intense.
Really, yeah. As we have moved over time, surgery has evolved, Nowadays, you cannot operate on a patient when they're feeling pain. Part of the management of anesthesia is pain management, okay? And the whole team that is involved in the operation of this patient has to ensure the patient is not in pain. First, they have to speak to the patient, okay, before the surgery. Explain everything, detail the ins and outs of this surgery, okay, and the risk factors, okay. This the patient must know, and the whole team has to go and review the patient 2 to 3 days before, the surgery, before the D-day for the surgery, so the patient is comfortable.
The team has to go and review that.
Yes, they have to review on a daily basis, okay, to ensure they prepare the patient. Of importance also, you need to prepare the relatives, okay. Because sometimes we tend to focus on the patient and we forget the relative.
The family and the relatives.
The family is very important because they are also patients. Much as they are not sick, they are actually they are more sick than the patient.
Than the patient himself.
So if you don't manage the patient, the relatives, then sometimes you'll have challenges because they'll continue speaking to the patient, the actual patient, in a certain way. So you need to manage them, encourage them so that they don't keep scaring the patient. That is one. So when you go in the theater now in the theater, the patient has to be made to sleep if it is a general operation, okay? That patient should not feel pain. Patient should continue breathing. Patient should not listen to anything.
Should make sure actually he or she is okay and well.
Exactly.
Okay.
So basically we do our best to ensure that the patient does not feel any pain at all. And then post-surgery, after the surgery, pain management is very key. And it starts right from theater to the recovery area. There's an area after the theater. There's a point where they put you for recovery, to monitor you, to monitor your oxygen levels, to monitor if you're breathing well, if you're able to breathe on your own, to monitor pain response, to see whether the patient is basically fine, to monitor the vitals. Is your pressure okay? Is your temperature fine? Okay? Are you bleeding from the incision site where you have been cut? Are you bleeding? Everything is normal, All these things have to be looked at before you are transferred back to the ward. So the whole process, pain must be controlled. Yes.
Pain must be controlled.
As much as possible.
As much as, okay, fine. And now with what you're explaining, is that the entire process that goes in before a patient goes into surgery, or there's something extra? Because also there's that aspect of probably encouraging the patient, talking to him or her, maybe ensuring them that things are just going to be fine. Because sometimes one may be really anxious, you're scared and you're wondering, will I really come out of this thing alive? What will happen after me? Stuff such as that one.
There's what we call informed consent. Okay? In hospital. An informed consent simply means the doctor must give all information in fullness to the patient. The advantages and the few disadvantages, if any.
If you're choosing to go through the process.
Exactly.
Okay.
And at the end of that process, the patient has to consent that, yes, the doctor has explained to me everything. I have understood, and I agree to the procedure that is going to be done. And I'm liable for anything that might happen. I agree. Okay? That the patient has to sign if the patient is in his normal senses. If the patient is not is a minor, for example, below 18 years, according to our law, that patient cannot consent. Then the guardian has to consent. Okay? Also, there's a scenario where you can have a patient is incapacitated mentally. So the guardian also has to sign for that patient.
That means they're not in the right state of mind at all.
Exactly. So that one also, the guardian has to sign on their behalf. But full detail of whatever that will entail in this procedure has to be given. Okay? And like I said, you have to have 3 days prior, every day, having a chat with the relatives.
This is before the actual day.
Before the actual day.
So actually there's an entire process that goes into this.
And the entire team that will be involved in this procedure has to keep checking on this patient, keep discussing. The anesthesiologist or anesthetist, the nurse, the chief nurse, the doctor who will conduct the surgery himself, this whole team, whoever has to be involved, they have to go and review this patient on a daily basis, have a discussion with the relatives or the guardians, so that all of you are on the same page, on a day-to-day basis, what process is going to happen, and after what will happen, how long will the procedure take. It may go beyond the assumed time, but at least they should have a clue so that they're not anxious why their patient has taken a whole day in theater because it is a heart surgery, and probably they thought maybe it will take 1 hour.
And they're wondering why is it taking the entire day,
that
even
is when
sometimes
you'll walk
2
around the
days.
theater area and you'll find
try
people
to
saying,
peep in the window.
has our patient passed on, and these people are not telling us.
Okay.
All this has to be discussed with the guardian.
Okay. Now, Dr. There's sometimes I want to imagine that probably a scenario where someone you've walked through the process with this person, you have explained to them, even probably agreed and even signed the consent. Probably and I want to imagine that in that kind of scenario, they are now mentally prepared to go under the procedure. But just like I mentioned before, there's that case of anxiety, probably you're scared. Have you been in a situation as a doctor where someone has gone through the process, agreed, but then it gets to a point where they say, no, I'm not doing this anymore, and they really have to, go through the surgery?
That's why I said initially that it's a process, okay? That can happen, and it happens sometimes.
So it can happen?
Yes, it happens.
It's a probable case.
But if you look into those cases, you find probably the medical team focused on the patient, and they did not focus on the relatives or the guardian. Remember,
so
I told you.
It's very important.
Yes, remember I told you.
Yes,
I told you if you don't manage the relatives, they're actually more sick than the patient.
Okay.
If you don't manage them well and explain to them, because patients have a tendency of listening to other people around them, who are non-medics, and they'll take their word sometimes as gospel truth. I don't know why, but it happens. So that is why, as medics, as healthcare, we need to manage the relatives. If you manage the relatives well, you manage the patient well, the relatives will keep encouraging the patient. And yours will be supplementary.
And so you just come to finish the work. If
Exactly.
you do the procedure, just come and do the procedure.
Because these are the people around this patient every day,
They know
every
the
minute.
patient better.
Exactly.
Okay.
So if they encourage, if the patient sees that, everyone is standing with me, everyone tells me I'll do it,
Even it's important because
it's
of
important,
this and that.
yes. She'll be relaxed.
Okay.
Yes.
So again, really just, reiterating that it is very important, not just to focus on the patient alone, but also the family and the relatives, as they play a vital role.
Exactly.
All right. Now, just to remind our viewers, I'm speaking to Dr. Brian, talking to us about general surgeries, what exactly it means when you say general surgeries, what kind of surgeries comprise of this general kind of surgeries, and how to proper manage them. And also later on, we'll touch on the issue of COVID-19 and patients going to hospital. Now, Dr. Lee, before we get to that aspect of COVID, again, you had mentioned earlier on about the risk factors. So that just makes me to want to know, are there risky kind of surgeries? That you say, that this one is, even for me as a medic, this is actually risky.
Every surgery is risky.
Every surgery is risky?
Yeah, every surgery has a risk, and that's why I said the doctor has to explain to the patient the advantages and the disadvantages or the risks involved, okay? Even a small surgery like circumcision can kill, okay?
So we can think it is small, but it's not quite as how we want to imagine.
Sometimes if, let's use circumcision because it's very common.
Yes.
Sometimes the drugs we use, if someone is overdosed, okay, though these risk factors can be prevented, many times they can be prevented, but sometimes it just happens, okay? Maybe it's out of some laxity of one of the team members, anything can go wrong, but the team should be able to attend to any emergency that will arise out of this procedure, okay? So if you go to any theater, they always have a whole emergency team
okay,
nearby on standby in case of anything. Anything can go wrong. Sometimes I've seen doctors who are conducting a heart surgery, and somehow the heart is stopping. So an emergency team has to come in. Of course, in the middle, or you are doing an abdominal surgery and the patient starts getting a cardiac arrest. So the emergency team has to come in. As you, the surgeon, general surgeon, you're trying to close up the abdomen, then the other team has to come in and start working on the heart, to ensure that the patient is able to wake up. It happens. So all these are risk factors that have to be explained to the patient, okay? But of importance, you must ensure that you have an emergency team. You're ready to handle any emergency that can rise, can arise out of any surgery. If you are not sure that you are able to attend to any emergency, then don't start the surgery.
Don't start. Don't try and ensure that you're a surgeon, you went to school for this.
Yes, it is safe not to start up until you are able to attend to any emergency that may come up. Yeah, yes.
And I think that is very important, just making us understand that, you know, this thing is not always a one-man show, that even after you've talked to the patient, talked to the family and relatives, just for you as a doctor, as a surgeon, it's not just you as a person. Actually, there's an entire team that backs you as a doctor. So I think that's really important to just make us understand. Now, let's talk about foods. What kind of foods does a patient need not eat when they're about to go for a procedure? Because sometimes you'll say, you know me, I can take anything. I can drink water, I can take tea, or I'm used to a certain habit, taking alcohol, smoking, so it's just fine. It's just a surgery anyway. So what does a patient need not take when they're about to go under a procedure?
You know, there's a general rule we use, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
There's a general rule we say, because you can't stop a patient from eating. Yeah. And you can't tell a patient, you know, I want you to eat meat. Yeah, I want you to eat chicken only, you know. The patient should be able to eat what they can afford. Okay. Some people can only afford grains. Some people can only afford cereals, you know. Some people can afford the meat. Some people can afford the chicken. Others can afford the fish. Whatever the patient can afford, they are able to eat, unless it is contraindicated in their condition. But let me come to what we usually tell people is, do not eat 24 hours or 12 hours before the surgery.
Wow, there's a time frame there.
Yes, there's a time frame we usually give. Only take fluids, okay? Water, maybe milk, okay? Even the milk, we tell you stop probably at night, at midnight.
So you can take water?
You can take water up to some extent, not even up to, maybe up to midnight you can take water. We can advise that. But at least 12 hours before the surgery, you should not eat solid foods. And the reason is simple. You know, when we make you sleep so that surgery can happen, part of the things we have taken over from you is your ability to control your body. Okay?
Oh, yeah.
Including swallowing.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
So because we have taken away that ability, natural ability from you, so we have to control it artificially. Okay? We have to put a tube. So if you have food in your stomach,
you've been eating and eating
you have
throughout
been
the entire
eating and
night.
eating and eating, there's a risk of it coming back. Okay? And then it will go into your airway. Yeah? So that is what we try to avoid. So that alone can cause complications in the procedure.
In the process.
In the process of surgery, because if you are going to have fluid, uji, coming away from your stomach into the airway, then it will go into the lungs where it's not
So you
supposed.
wonder, which one do you do? Do
Yes,
you start managing this one, or you continue the procedure itself?
So it's a risk management process that we take the patient through. Do not eat 12 hours before. If you are to take water or chai, take only up to this time. Don't take anything beyond this hour, up to until we complete the procedure. And we keep feeding you with food through the veins. So there's that ability. So the nurses on the ward will, of course, the doctor will come and advise, stop the foods, but put the patient on glucose, on some food through their veins so that they don't get weak. Okay, yes.
And I think you've really done well to at least clarify that bit of water, because again, also I was looking at another article that was saying also for water you can't take, and for me I was wondering, you know, what is wrong with water? But I think it's also important that you said it's only until a specified time, and also important for you to tell us that it's because of the risks that you're trying to avoid and other complications that might come about while the procedure is happening. And also for the foods, you say that a person can take any kind of food that they are comfortable with and the ones that they can afford.
They can afford.
So that means there's no restriction that you have to take beans, or you have to take meat, or you have to take milk.
Exactly. Unless specifically advised by the doctor. There could be conditions that the doctor will advise, take only this for this number of months. Don't.
Which conditions are those, Doctor?
You know, there are people who could be having some abdominal issues, for example, and the doctor will advise you, do not take legumes. Legumes are like beans. Okay, those kind of cereals, because they'll cause a certain kind of feeling, which is not good, that the doctor is trying to manage. Okay.
Yes.
So there are many conditions, and different conditions might call for certain foods. Okay. For example, people with kidney conditions, you might tell them, you know, reduce on the intake of protein. Or
in that moment when you're about to go to the procedure.
Yes.
All right.
Because we need to control certain parameters. Okay. So different diseases might call for different diet, and that is where the nutritionist is very key. in advising the patient.
Okay.
Because you need to advise
so
the
again,
patient.
also there's that aspect of nutritionist.
Yes.
So,
it's a
surgery is
holistic
a
care.
whole...
Holistic care
Wow.
involving so many different professionals.
Okay.
Because sometimes you want a nutritionist to explain to this patient and say, ask the patient, what can you afford?
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
So if you ask a patient, what can you afford? So the patient will tell you, this is what I can afford, this is what I can afford. Then the nutritionist has to ensure that from that list the patient has given, she can actually ensure that there is a balanced diet, okay?
Yes.
From the different things that the patient can afford to buy, okay? Not necessarily going for certain foods that are expensive. Yeah.
Well, I think this looks more like a learning curve. You know, it's just interesting to know that it's just, you just don't wake up or you're not scheduled for a surgery and then you go for it.
Exactly.
Actually, there's a whole team, even a nutritionist, to advise you what exactly you need to eat, what you need to avoid, also based on your condition. If you have prevailing conditions, what you need to avoid, what you need to eat. Now, let's talk about immunity, because even given the kind of time we are in, the COVID-19 pandemic time, most of what you are hearing right now is at least get and try as much as you can to eat foods that can boost your immunity, you know, because we don't have a cure yet, we don't have a vaccine. So what you're trying to do is get our immunity up to par. Now, for someone who's probably scheduled for a surgery or even slated to go for one, is there a specific food, a specific kind of foods they need to eat to boost their immunity before they go for the procedure? And if so, what is the importance of that?
You know, true. Thank you so much, Doreen, for that question. This is a very important question. Because COVID is around our country and we cannot run away from it.
Exactly.
We have to speak about it because everyone wants to understand what is this disease about, how do we manage, how do we prevent it.
Yes.
So COVID, like you have rightly said, there's no known treatment as of now. There are only drugs that can help manage the different symptoms that come about with COVID when you get infected with COVID. But of importance is that we all know one's immunity is built by what they eat. Okay?
It's all what you take in.
It's what you take in. Okay? That is what builds your immunity. So we have to take a lot of vitamin-containing foods, a lot of fruits. Okay? These are mangoes, watermelons, name them, there are many. Okay? Oranges, all these things.
The
Vitamin C,
in general
vitamin
also.
C. You need to get iron from the green leafy vegetables like skuma and there are many spinach.
Yes.
Yeah, all these green leafy vegetables. And then you require zinc. Okay, so cereals are also rich in zinc. Okay, and the green leafy vegetables are also rich in zinc. So all these are micronutrients that boost the body's immunity and they help in the fight of COVID. COVID is a virus. Usually, viruses like common cold, flu, ya kawaida, homa.
Yes.
We fight them off with normal body immunity.
Homa ya baridi too.
Yes. You know, it's just your body immunity that will fight off. You don't, even if you don't go and take any drug, etaisha, ni kukunywa tu maji, you know, some water, and you'll be fine. Just rehydration, yeah, to
and you're good to go.
But
in that case.
COVID has seemed to be a more stronger virus. It's more aggressive, more intense. It kills faster. I think if not managed, COVID has the capacity to kill you in 30 days. Yeah, if nothing has been done. So it's scary. It's scary. There's no vaccine. There's no cure. It's killed thousands and thousands of people. So we are all concerned. But then how do we manage a COVID patient who has come into theater?
Yes.
Either has an emergency or has an urgency.
Okay. The two cases that we talked about earlier.
Exactly. So let's try and relate the two. So in
Yes.
hospital, what are we doing now? So what we are doing in healthcare is that we cannot sentence a patient to death because they have COVID. Okay? As medics, it is our duty to save life, regardless of whether someone has COVID or not. So first, the medics have to protect themselves.
That is the first step.
The first thing. Protection and safety of the medics, all of them, from the patient's condition. They should not get infected because if they get infected, then we have to isolate them. So who will come and work on the others?
You can't get infected just because you're trying to save a patient.
So what we do, we always do a test for every patient who's going to go into theater, so that the whole theater team,
that is a COVID test for any patient who had been scheduled for a theater or set to just go in.
Any patient now who is going to theater, regardless of whether he has symptoms or not, a COVID test is a must. Okay? So if you are found to be COVID positive, the procedure has to go on. It is scheduled.
So the theater will still...
The procedure has to go on.
Still happen?
The only thing that happens is that the team has to prepare in a certain way.
It's now different.
It's about the protection of the medics, that's all. Yeah, and the disinfection of the whole area after the procedure. So immediately after this procedure of this COVID positive patient, all the doctors have to dress up with PPE, yeah, and then they have to be ready. Immediately after, they have to disinfect everything, yeah, and then wait for some time before they can bring in any other procedure. Okay? So that is the process. When someone is COVID negative, normal process. People don't have to really dress up so much and use PPE, a lot of PPE. So it's normal procedure. Patient is normal, you know. It's normal operation. It's not a COVID patient. So this is what the only difference that has come with the COVID.
So that means if someone has been scheduled for a surgery, they can still be able to go in and don't have to fear that I might get infected. You know, because again, there's also that fear of, I might be negative, I don't have the disease, I'm scheduled for a surgery next week, but there's that fear in me that if I go, what if I get COVID? Because again, there's that whole idea of, when you just hear hospitals, you just think COVID. So I think you've at least well broken it for us and try to make us understand that there's a process for someone who's COVID positive and they're said to go for theater, and someone who's just okay. Now let's talk about this.
And even though, just to come, let me just, even after the procedure.
Okay.
The COVID positive patients shall be put in a separate ward.
In a separate ward.
Where no one else is allowed to walk in. Okay? As the other team. So there's a clear demarcation in the ward and theaters on which patient goes what direction, depending on the current situation that is happening of COVID.
Okay, so what also this means is that any patient can go to hospital for a checkup. If they're scheduled for surgery, they can still go through it, and they need to dispel that fear of, what if I get infected? Just from what you've explained. Okay, now very briefly, as you bring it to a close, the aspect of managing stigma. A case in point, someone has gone to hospital, they were scheduled for a procedure, maybe due to complication, they stayed there for like a week or two, they come out and people think, if it's 2 weeks and 3 weeks, this person probably could have had COVID, or they probably got it there. So how do you manage the stigma that comes with this situation and someone who was set or who had gone for a procedure?
Do you mean COVID?
Yes.
You know, we all have to accept that COVID is in the community. Here. And no one has immunity against it. It can get me, it can get anyone. And I think the minister has always said it very clearly every day. And I want to thank him. But as a medic, just like I said, there has to be continuous discussion between the relatives. These relatives who we tend to ignore play a major role in the management of the patient and the community and the people around. You know? If you speak and update them rightly, they'll give a positive feedback to the rest, because there are many other family members who are asking them questions.
Wow, now it makes sense.
Some people in Nyeri, they are calling Nairobi people, you know, how is the patient? If this one in Nairobi says, I don't know, you know, the doctors are not speaking to me. Maybe he's already dead, you know. This kind of communication will cause anxiety. And once there's a certain perception that has been built in the community, it's not easy to remove. But you manage perception by continuous engagement with all the relatives, with all the people surrounding the patient. Yes.
Okay, so at least that, again, it still boils down to family, to relatives.
Exactly.
Wow, and my director just says that he has added us at least 5 more minutes, so we can at least try and exhaust a bit, especially when it comes to that issue of, you know, going for theater and the COVID issue, just trying to relate the two. Again, there's that aspect of diseases, just contracting any kind of diseases again. Someone probably scheduled for, again, the surgery, wants to go to hospital, but then thinks, what if I get other diseases? So what are you medics doing to at least ensure this does not happen, this doesn't take place? Someone just goes in, get their procedure done. After that period of time, they come out and they're good to go.
There is a principle when you speak about quality of care.
Okay.
In hospital, to prevent internal infection. There's a principle we call infection prevention and control of the patient. It does not look good, or it's not a good thing for a patient to walk in with malaria and goes out with pneumonia.
Imagine.
Or develops pneumonia in a hospital.
Or get other many
or
diseases.
Develop cholera, or develop, you know, name it.
Yes.
Or even COVID. So infection prevention and control simply means you want to mitigate a patient from contracting a disease they did not come with, probably from another patient. So part of the things we have to do is things like PPE. Okay, if you are touching this patient
So that's why,
with gloves,
so that's why when you hear health workers continue to say that we need this PPEs, it is this important.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because it will prevent transmission of infection from one patient to another patient. If it is not done, or improper PPE is being bought and given to the health workers, they'll get infected themselves. They'll contract the disease from the patient. But above all, if they don't have enough PPE, this health worker has 10 patients to see in the same ward, okay? Probably having different things. He'll transmit this condition to another. But also as health workers, there are practices that we have to do. For example, every after examination of one patient, you're supposed to wash your hands.
It is mandatory.
It is mandatory with water and soap, or with a hand rub of 70% alcohol. Okay? So that it kills off the germs and you don't transmit the germs to another patient. So this is how it has to be done. Okay? If you're examining someone and you're required to use gloves, you have to use the gloves.
Yes.
Okay? Yeah. If you are disposing a material, a tube you have pulled out of a patient, there's a proper way of disposing it off in the right bin, and the right color-coded bin. So all these are done, are practices that are in the hospital setting to try and minimize infection. But for COVID, if you allow me, because I think we are concluding, the ministry brought out something we call home-based care. Okay, this is also trying to manage the surging numbers of patients, and I agree with them, because not every patient requires to come to hospital. Because if every patient is going to come to hospital, hospitals will be overwhelmed. Okay, they will be flooded. We shall end up sending all other conditions to manage COVID, because you'll end up telling all patients with malaria don't come. And like we have seen, malaria infections have surged in the western region. So this is not a good thing. So we need to have those that are not severely ill to be managed at home. Okay, and as an organization, we have started a program where we are managing patients with COVID right in their places. Okay,
right at home.
Right at home, because we send the doctor, we give oxygen, we give all these nutrition drugs that you spoke about. There's a nutritionist on call, there's a doctor on call all the time, so that we try and help the government manage this situation. Because much as we have told the people stay at home, I think we have not done much to reach out to the people. We have had deaths that are happening in houses because people have nowhere to go. Some hospitals are full to capacity. They're not able to get a doctor. So they are in a situation, a confused situation, where they don't know what to do. And ever since we launched out, I think we have seen so far about 30 patients. And these are lives that do not require much. Okay? Some are patients with chronic illnesses. They have to be attended to. They have to be given their drugs. COVID itself makes their condition worse. So they require a doctor to go in and really examine them, monitor them, and see how they are faring on a day-to-day basis, so that they go through this phase. Unfortunately, sometimes we have lost some people. But I think up to until when we have a vaccine, that's when this COVID will be out of our country.
Out of our country. Now, Doctor, we have like 1.5 minutes, and I want in this span of time to just tell us your parting shot, especially for that home-based care, for someone who's undergone a procedure. What does it look like, very quickly?
For someone who has undergone a procedure. You know, if someone has undergone a procedure and was COVID, okay, of course you reach, there will be hospital care of about 3-4 days maximum, and then you are discharged, but you are still COVID positive. So that is when we come in, and the doctor has to come and monitor you. Remember, COVID, if it finds your body weak, it can make it worse. So this person who has undergone a procedure, already their body is having a stress. So they are bound to get a bad COVID situation. But such a patient is a patient who would be kept in hospital slightly longer, because their body is already stressed, and with the stress of COVID, they might have a worse infection of COVID. So you want to stay with that patient longer, slightly longer in the hospital for about 7 to 10 days to see.
Before they can go home.
Before you can discharge them onto home-based care if they're symptom-free.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, thank you so much, Dr. for that, at least for giving us insights on what you mean when you say general surgeries, and also just trying to intertwine it with COVID and see how we can move past this, especially for those that are scheduled for procedures or even assurgeries of any type.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, that has been Dr. Brian Mulando, Head Medix Bliss Healthcare Limited, talking to us about general surgeries, how to proper manage them, and also just trying to interlink it with COVID and see how we can move past the fear and stigma issue. And that is how we bring it to a close this Tuesday morning. Many thanks for making time. Till tomorrow, stay safe, be kind to one another. My name is Dorina Range. Good morning.
I wonder where Dharma is hiding with her son. I have looked for her everywhere. What if she has not left Patliputra? Then what will happen?
The more Ashok will grow in stature for your father. And who knows, someday he will grow so big in stature that he is going to topple you. And that will be your end.
Hey! Shut up!
On the next episode,
How about Juana?
Of course. Juana. Nobody who loves our daughters as much as she does. And she's a very honest woman. Let's put Juana down as the beneficiary.
So that's what's going on. I have to figure out a way to get to that computer.
What are you doing, Sophia?
In love with Ramon.
Wajune, kama ndege wa angani, hawalimi na wasibi, na wanakula na wanakunywa.
Washa tutoke hapa nje, tupigwe na miale ya jua, alafu tujie kwa nyumba, tukule miujiza. Nimekujia rent.
Ai.
Babe, sumsot tu aende.
Unajua Jobu, hujui kuishi na watu hata kidogo. Mwezi wa kwanza na umezidi kulipa nyumba. Jobu, how?
Mimi na wewe tunaweza saidiana.
Tunaweza kusaidiana. Wacha nikuletee juice.
Pacha.
The date for the FA Cup final is set, and so are we, as Arsenal and Chelsea face off again on the 1st of August at Wembley. The All-London affair will be broadcast live and exclusive on KBC Channel 1 this Saturday from 7:30 p.m.
Cesar Azpilicueta again for Giroud. Oh, and it's found a way through.
Heads up. It is a showdown worth your wait.
I'm a member of the Kenya Quilt Guild, which is the organization that's put on this show. I've been quilting myself for many, many years. I'm the current chairman of the Kenya Quilt Guild. We have about 80 members from all walks of life, but with one thing in common, we all have a passion for quilting.
Tuko na kikundi ambacho kinaitwa Salama Mamas ambacho kilianzishwa mwaka wa 2014. Tuko wa mama watano ambao tulianzisha hii kikundi kwa kufanya kazi ya kushona. Imetuletea manufaa mengi kwa sababu huwa tunaishona kulingana na order, alafu tunaiuza na inatufaidisha kwa upande wa